We'd like to go ahead and get started. I'd like to wish everyone a good evening and welcome to another episode of Adoption Happy Hour, brought to you by the National Association of Adoptees and Parents. We're also known as NAAP, where it's our mission to bring unity to our community by elevating the voices of the adoption constellation, provide connections, resources, and networking opportunities with other organizations. So we have a very special organization with us tonight, as well as a special guest. We have the founders and a special guest that we're going to announce just in a moment. But before we do that, we have a little housekeeping item and just a few items to go through before we begin our evening. I'm Marcie Keithley, your host, and I'm also one of the executive leadership team members, as well as Beth Story, who will be helping out in the Zoom room. And I believe, let's see, we have Barbara Robertson, who is a board meter and a director for the Senior Advisory Committee. Leslie Pate McKinnon's with us this evening. Any other board members with us tonight?
No.
That's okay. I think David had a commitment. So we'll just wait until Beth pulls up a slide here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm having trouble getting it to open. Just
That's
a
okay.
second.
It's Zoom. We always, not a problem.
I have it right here, but it doesn't want to open.
I pretty much got it memorized. I've done so many of these. If you can't get it open, that's okay.
There we go. There we go.
Got it? Okay. We just want to remind you to please remain muted. Raise your hand if you do have a question or need to be recognized. You're welcome to use the chat bar and post questions. Beth will be following those, so we'll make sure that all of your questions are addressed. We remind you this is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential, and portions of this event are recorded and shared on our YouTube channel. Also, if you're experiencing a serious mental health event or suicide thoughts, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And we'll wait for the next one.
Which one did you want now?
About us.
Okay. It says I'm sharing.
You are, but we just have to remove that slide. If not, that's okay, because I can take it from here. Yeah, we just like to, for our new attendees this evening, for those of you that might not know who we are, again, we were formerly Indiana Adoptee Network, and we've been around since 2015, changed our name at the beginning of the year. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Beth. And just a little bit about us so you know who we are. And obviously, a lot of the talk right now is about our annual conference in Indianapolis that is September 9th, 10th, and 11th. Actually, we were just up there on Wednesday checking out the venue. We met with fellow board member Moses Farrow, took some pictures and did a little bit of video. So you might have seen us out on Facebook, but we've got lots more to show you. So that's coming up in September, and we'll have our next newsletter will be coming out July the 15th. And just so you know a little bit about us. That's good. Okay, so we want to welcome our guest this evening. We are so privileged and honored to have the Right to Know organization with us tonight. And some of you might be going, why are they here this evening? Well, initially, I asked myself the same question. We were introduced by Leslie Pate McKinnon, who connected us. It's been about 2 months ago, hadn't it? Mm-hmm. We first chatted. And there's so many, while there's differences, there's a lot of commonalities between adoptees and the Right to Know. And we're going to get huge lesson in, and I have to say this right, the intersectionality of misattributed parentage experience. And now I know why they say MPE, right?
You did it great.
Said it right. So we're going to learn a lot from them, and we're just so excited to have the three of you this evening. We have Alesia Cohen. She is co-founder. Cara Rubenstein Dyron. Did I say it right? Did I butcher it? Was I close? As a co-founder, and then Cassandra Adams as our special guest. So I welcome you, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. Well, just thank you to everybody for having us here. We're going to put a slideshow up. And, you know, Marcie's already told you the title, but we're going to be speaking on the intersectionality of MPEs, which stands for Misattributed Parentage Experience. And on this slide that we made, you could see MPE in the center, how it evolved. With our description here, we have the assisted conception on one side there on the left, the adoptees on the other side, which for the purposes of what we're speaking on are the hidden, the orphan, foster care, late discovery adoptee. And then at the bottom, you see the non-paternal event, extramarital affair, tryst, rape, assault. Cassandra will be speaking more on assisted conception. I'm going to tell just a brief little story about myself. In 2014, I took a over-the-counter DNA test, and to my shock, I found out that the man that had raised me was not my father. He was not my biological father. I was 51 years old when this happened in 2014. It wasn't until 4 years later, through a lot of detective work and with the help of angels, and I'm actually wearing an angel t-shirt. It was, this is a very important group to our organization that we partner with. That was started by Laura Leslie. The help of angels is what finally helped me find my family. And this, I can't even begin to explain the trauma that I went through with this, and where I'm at now. As we go through the process of our speaking with you guys, we'll talk more about the different feelings that we all have had and how that relates to you guys. I mean, I'm just so thankful to the adoption community. Thank you, Marcie, for letting us come here and speak our truth and talking to you guys about what we're going through. Cara? Or Cassandra?
Hello, yes, so I'll just give first just a brief description of my story as well. So I'm here to kind of bring in the donor conception side of this. So I am late discovery. I also took a DNA test in 2017 and opened the results in the middle of the night out of curiosity, and saw that I was 50% Ashkenazi Jewish, which was not what I expected at all. And so throughout the course of the night, trying to figure out how this made sense, and eventually the next morning confronting my mother and finding that at the age of 35, that my dad was infertile, and that my parents had used a sperm donor to conceive me. And so it's been a journey, almost 4 years now, of kind of delving into the emotional aspects of late discovery, especially, which I'm not sure many of the LDAs understand. And also the fertility industry, which it parallels the adoption industry in many ways. And so I have a relationship with my biological father. He's been open. I have several other siblings, a few that he raised, and a few who are also donor conceived like me. And we have no idea how many are out there. There weren't records kept at the time. So it's been a very crazy few years. And I also help moderate a very large, the largest community on the internet for the whole donor conception triad. So recipient parents, donors, and donor conceived people. So I do a lot of kind of counseling with parents who have young children now to try to work on best practices for the future generations, because as we're going to discuss, finding out these secrets later in life is no fun at all.
First, before I get started, we wanted to say thank you to the adoption community, because we consider you guys sort of the trailblazers. You guys have been here for a long time, sort of creating the path, and with the explosion of over-the-counter DNA testing, you know, we have these new people popping up, like Cassandra from assisted conception, or Alesia and I from a non-paternal event. So there's still a lot to do, but you guys have definitely started the way for us. So thank you. Alesia told her story briefly, and Cassandra, I'm also what we would call an NPE, a non-paternal event. I took a DNA test to find out where in Africa my father was from, because, you know, he was a slave and most people don't know where. And I too, like Cassandra, got the little pie chart back and was half Jewish, not half. There's no African DNA at all in me, which was very shocking. I learned that about 3 years ago. It took a little while, not as long, nearly as long as Alesia, to find my biological family. And my biological family has rejected me. And I have spent the last few years building Right to Know and rebuilding my sense of identity. We founded Right to Know. It's a nonprofit, and we advocate for people whose genetic parents aren't their supporting parents or their legal parents or raising parents. There seems to be a few different words for this. And we focus on education, mental health, and legislation. We started in September 2019 with Alesia, myself, and Gregory Loy, who is conceived through assisted conception. And now we also have we call her Tiana, on our board as well. She was conceived through assisted conception, found out later in life. And then David Raitt, who is an adoptee. So that's our current board right now on Right to Know. Terms, I think, get confusing for people. So we wanted to just spend a moment about terms. We use misattributed parentage experience, meaning the discovery of a change in a person's parental genealogy from a previously or undisclosed non-paternal event. So somebody who has an affair or a one-night stand, I'm the product of a one-night stand, or who's the product of rape or assault. Someone who's conceived through assisted conception, and that can be donor conception or sperm donor. I want to say donor with quotes, because I feel like donor is really a term that can be, it's not really accurate. These people are paid. So when I say donor or donor conceived, it's because that's the term that's widely used. I wish we had a different term for it. So I do try to use assisted conception, because they're not donor conceived, right? Nobody donated most of the time. They were paid for it. But there's also egg donation, embryo donation, and surrogacy in this category. And then of course, adoption, people who, and I think even people who are adopted fall under misattributed parentage, even if you're not a late discovery adoptee. And at Right to Know, it's really important for us to make sure everybody feels inclusive. We want to be an inclusive entity to try to help people as they process their discovery, or as they're coming out of the fog to find their biological family and deal with their sense of identity. So we're definitely an inclusive organization. I'm going to try to probably use the term genetic parent or biological parent. We talked about supporting parent and raising parent. I always look at it as that's the legal parent, because if little Jimmy hits a baseball into somebody's window, who has to pay for the window? So that's what a supporting, raising legal parent is. It's the person who's legally responsible for that child, whatever they may do. So we'll keep going. I was thinking about this because I think there's so much intersectionality between all the different aspects of different groups of communities of misattributed parentage, between the adoption world, between the assisted conception, and those of us who are non-paternal events. And I decided there's really 3 phases in this. There's your discovery phase, where you learn you have a misattributed parentage. And again, this can be at any point in your life. There's sort of what I would call the roller coaster phase, where you have to deal with all the emotions of your discovery. And then what I would call the architect phase, where you're rebuilding your sense of self and who you are. And I'm sure many people who are listening can identify with some of these parts. So we're going to delve into these a little bit more closely. Surprise, you're not who you thought you were. I think that for various reasons, we'll talk about those in a second. A lot of times it's a surprise. But sometimes it's not a surprise. And like I said, at Right to Know, we think that even if you grow up knowing that there's an unknown, like mom says to you, if you're an MPE, yeah, that's not your dad. Your dad's out there somewhere. You know, there's this unknown parent. You have this misattributed parentage still because you don't know who your genetic parent is. And you may decide you never want to know, but at some point you may come out of the fog and decide, I do want to know. I want to know who this genetic parent is. So I think that, as I was saying, misattributed parentage can apply to anybody, regardless of whether or not it's a DNA surprise or you've known all your life that one of your parents isn't your genetic parent. I think this applies to assisted conception sometimes too, Cassandra.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So especially people who were conceived using a sperm or egg donor, who are kind of coming of age right now. More and more parents are being honest. People my age tend to have been lied to. People who are, you know, in their late teens, in their early 20s, who have known their whole lives that they were donor conceived, seem to be, from what we can kind of discern, going through the same process as an adoptee who's always known, where there's a fog, where there's the parental narrative that you were so wanted, we went through all this to have you, you're very special, and that's all lovely, but it kind of keeps the person from recognizing what they might be missing, or what else is out there, even from understanding the possibility. I know there was recently a discussion with a group of young donor conceived individuals, you know, in their late teens, and one of them was kind of asked about the possibility of knowing their biological parent, and I noted that this young teenager described it as ominous. The thought was ominous, and he kind of didn't want to go there. And I just thought to myself, and the facilitator was just thrilled that the person didn't want to go there, because it was someone who had used donor conception to grow their family. So there really comes this point, even for donor conceived people who've always known, where they recognize that this person isn't just a donor, that the narrative that they were told has holes in it, and that this person is half of who they are, you know, genetically, in the way they look, in their personality, and they're finding that they're kind of reliving all that grief in this discovery stage, as if they had just discovered, and also feeling a lot of feelings toward their parents. So it kind of mirrors the adoptee experience in that way. So we definitely are resonating more and more with the fog experience. And a lot of us who have discovered later in life have a very, very much shortened fog experience. Mine was probably just a few hours before I realized how much I needed to know, and how much anger and grief started to well up. So,
Yeah.
So some people discover that they have misattributed parentage in different ways. Alesia, you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I was just reading from, I think, Diana in the chat box. She said, I was 38 when I found out that my parents were not my bio parents. And what we, within the MPE community, what we have seen is sort of one of the examples is the sort of the spill the beans where somebody in the family, a family friend, maybe even one of the parents, maybe an aunt has come out, and it's just sort of an accident that you find out. And the shock of that is pretty big. But that's one of the ways that happens.
Yeah, weren't you mentioning a mom who like was really sick with 104 temperature or
Oh
something?
my God, yeah, Cara, that was crazy. I had been working with a woman that was looking for a family member, another family member. It was actually her bio father. And in the interim, we've known each other about 4 or 5 years now, but she had been telling me this from a couple years ago, that when her mother had a high fever, like of 104, she started like hallucinating and kept saying things like, I should have went back and got him. I should have went back and got him. I should have went and got my boy. I should have went and got my baby. And she has 9 other kids by then. Okay. She's like in her late 80s. And so she passed away last year. Come to find out, this friend of mine had done the DNA test already. She got a high match of a half sibling. So her mother, when she was sick with a high fever, had been telling the truth about something that she had kept a secret all these years.
And I'm sure that occurs with assisted conception, where someone accidentally says something or lets something slip, and that's how the person finds out that they're conceived that way.
Yes, it's easier to hide with using a donor or assisted conception, because normally there's the mother is pregnant, and so it's easier to not disclose that there was another person involved in that pregnancy. But there are all kinds of situations of people discovering paperwork from, in a drawer somewhere. And my mother was never given any paperwork in 1982, but some places, did give paperwork. Or a relative who was told, or a parent in the middle of a divorce. I know one of my siblings that I've met was told in the middle of a divorce. So, parents kind of getting back at each other. There's all kinds of ways that people find out, and sometimes and most of the time it's not in the best way.
Yeah, you mentioned paperwork. I know there's a woman who's an MPE. She was trying to plan her mother's 70th surprise birthday party, and she found a postcard from her bio father up in the attic, that said, "How's our daughter?" basically. So people do find these out in the most different ways. We all think of DNA testing is the way that most people figure this stuff out. Someone's trying to decide, should I wear lederhosen or a kilt? But there are these other ways that people do find this out. A lot of it is through the DNA test. We get them as gifts. We give them as a gift. Like in my case, I wanted to know my ethnicity, like where exactly in Africa. And then, of course, we find out the shocking news as a surprise.
Yeah, I know another woman that found out when she was 17, and she's now 52 years old, when her mother asked her to go get some paperwork out of the attic. It's kind of funny, the attic is coming up again. And she came across these letters, and the letter mentioned that her father was somebody else, and she had this letter in her hand going out of the attic to her mother about this. Can you imagine being 17 years old when that happens? It's unbelievable.
I know many adoptees will understand the the family tree assignment in school, and how painful that can be. And of course, it's not something we realize when we're going through it, if we think that we're being raised by both of our biological parents. But I know that there are many people who, no matter how they were conceived, but who had suspicions in genetics class. Actually, one of my doctors, when I told her what had happened to me, and I was still very raw from the experience, actually told me that she had found out that her father was not her biological father when she went to medical school, because she was studying blood types, and she inquired into what her her parents' blood types were, and realized that couldn't happen. And I know that there are other people in the groups who had suspicions like that, even when they were in elementary school, if that project was something that was done. And so there's all these clues. And then of course, once something like this happens to you, you look back on your life and you find those clues, things that didn't make sense, that suddenly have a new light shown on them. But while you're living it, you don't quite realize that you're living a falsehood in many ways.
Absolutely. I was thinking about that. I would have thought about it harder with my blood test in elementary school. I might have been able to figure it out then. So we have this discovery phase, however we come to it, whether it's a surprise or not, we learn that we have a misattributed parent, that one or both of our parents aren't our parents. And then we take this roller coaster ride. And I just want to be clear, I used to think I would process my NPE discovery and put it in a box and put it away, and I would just move on with my life, which was really silly. I now know I'm on this roller coaster for life. And there may be time, most of the time, I'm just cruising along and it's okay now. It's been 3 years, but still I go through the loop-de-loops and I have my bad days. And I think that's just, I have to hold true to myself that I'm on my this roller coaster forever. But when we first find out, we have a lot of emotions, big emotions. This graphic is actually from a survey we did in one of the Facebook groups. The words are the size of the most common word, how many times someone chose that word about what they felt about their misattributed parentage. So you can see lost was by far the biggest emotion that people felt. And then you have rejected, confused, betrayed, validated, right? Now you know why you thought you were the weirdo, the which one of these things doesn't belong Sesame Street song. You get it now. But I love that loved is there. Some people have these great experiences where the family just comes and embraces them in their experience. We also learn some new words. I love it's up here, monocopsis, which is such a great word. It's the subtle but persistent feeling of being out of place. I know I felt that my whole life. And Hariath isn't on here, but I think that's another new word that a lot of NPEs learn. It's a homesickness for a homesickness for a home that you can't return to, and maybe it's a home that never was. I know I have that feeling a lot about my biological family. And then the next thing we like to think about is, who knew? Was I the only one who didn't know? Was I the only one who was in the dark about my own origin story? In my case, when I called my mom, I have to be grateful that she didn't say the DNA is lying, because we hear that a lot. Parents who say, oh, the DNA test is wrong. That's just a bunch of, wacky science. So my mom said that must be true, but it was just as much of a shock for her as it was for me. Now I have to go back and think about my conception. Maybe at the time when she was 18 years old, she might have known that the man on my birth certificate wasn't my father, but she told herself that he was for so long that that was her truth for more than 40 years. And so in my case, I don't feel like there was a secret that was kept from me. But for most NPEs, people who are the product of an affair, a one-night stand, or rape or assault, there is that sense of secrecy that my origin story was kept from me.
Yeah, Cara, it's interesting about what you bring up about how you felt about it. For me, I was definitely one that the secrets were kept from me, but my mother went through the same thing that you talked about. Like the mother begins to believe themselves that the truth, the falsehood is the truth. And so my mother did that to me. I mean, I can tell you guys, I was so angry, but as I am a retired nurse, so what I ended up doing when I found out, I had my son test, I had my sister test, I got all my ducks in a row before I finally confronted my mother. And there was no way, if she were going to lie to me, that she just wasn't going to get by with it. So very much a lot of anger with that. And the fact was, I don't know what happened in her head, but she just had convinced herself, that I was my birth certificate's, biological father and child, excuse me. And we knew that I found out that was not the case.
Well, and she
Definitely a
had an
roller coaster.
affair, right? She'd had an affair for a little while.
Yes, my
Not
mother
just
had an
that- it was a-
affair.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had an affair. So, you know, when time went on, after quite a while, my mother started opening up more with me. And she actually said that her and my birth certificate dad made a decision or a pact to keep it between only the two of them. And so she knew the truth. It just, when it finally came out, she was, you know, how do you put it? It's out of the bag, right?
That's another big. I'm sure that word pact resonates with you, Cassandra.
I know, absolutely. That's exactly what it was for so many parents using assisted conception, even to this day, really. But many people think that it's a new technology, but really, especially sperm donation, has been going on since the late 1800s in humans, and especially it really picked up after World War II, the baby boom era. And so people who were conceived in the 40s, 50s, 60s, absolutely kept the secret 100%. In the 70s and 80s, I was conceived in the early 80s. I think doctors always intentionally misled the parents in some way or another. And there are cases where the mother knew that a donor was being used, and maybe the father didn't, or the father was told but not the mother. Like, there are these cases farther back in time, but for the most part, especially from the 60s and 70s onward, doctors did tell their patients that another person's sperm was being used. They did try to stretch the truth. A lot of times they were told that the sperm would be mixed, that they were fortifying the intended father's semen with another man's semen, and it would help like boost his sperm, like almost, I mean, really almost like the weak sperm would kind of hold on to the strong sperm and like ride up to the egg. And then, you know, the strong sperm would let the weak sperm off, and the weak sperm could penetrate the egg. And that doctors knew that that's not what was happening, but that's kind of what they told their patients. My parents were told to go home and have sex right away, as opposed to mixing the semen. But it was the same kind of thought process, was that somehow this procedure was boosting your husband's fertility. But everyone knew what it meant. And so my parents kept this secret together. They were the only two people who knew, them and the doctor. And it was intentionally kept. And as you know, as so many of us know, infertility has a huge stigma attached to it, even today. And so that was a big part of the secrecy of the time, was not even to let anyone know that you were struggling to get pregnant, and certainly not to let anyone know that there was someone else who was the biological parent of your child. You know, there were cases of doctors telling parents that, you know, if they told anyone, that perhaps the donor could come and get custody of the child, or the child would be considered a bastard, and all kinds of things that were told back in the day. I know there's a man who donated in the 70s who I know has said that they told him that it was like a blood donation, you know, and it's not. A whole nother person doesn't come when you donate blood. So there were all kinds of ways that the fertility, it wasn't quite an industry yet at that point, but how fertility specialists would spin this to get parents to keep it a secret, you know, even more so than they may otherwise have wanted to. And also, you know, the idea that it would just be better for the child never to know was also something that was just kind of, some doctors were forceful about that, and some were a little more just alluding to it. that, this was not pertinent information. The child, it would just upset your child. It would interfere with bonding between the non-biological parent and the child and stuff, which we all know from adoption is not the case. Early disclosure is absolutely necessary, and the same thing applies with parents using donors. But absolutely, these were some of the reasons why couples kept it a secret. Was the shame of infertility, or the shame of having a child with another person, and the desire to hide it, to really deny it, to forget that it happened. And that's why it's such a traumatic thing for so many of our parents, both of our parents, because they both really put it in another place in their minds, in a traumatic place in their minds for such a long time. And unfortunately, when we make these discoveries, we bring it out again, and they've never dealt with it. So it's hard.
Yeah, and I know that there's that sense of betrayal from your parent, because it's supposed to be this trusted relationship for assisted conception, or late discovery adoptees, or people from a tryst or an affair. You assume that you have, you trust your parent. Out of all the relationships you have in your life, those are who you trust. You would never expect them to be lying about something so primary to who you are. The next thing that I was thinking is a theme for everybody on this roller coaster emotional ride, which I think applies more to assisted conception and adoptees, is this concept of existential gratitude, that you should be happy that you're alive. I know that for those who are the product of rape or an assault, sometimes they hear, oh, you should be lucky your mom didn't abort you. There's that kind of put on those kids, those adults, that you should have this gratitude for your life, so you can't experience the rest of these things you're experiencing. We're going to ignore those things. You should just be happy. That was really the only way I could think of existential gratitude applying to MPEs, but I know for assisted conception, right, Cassandra, there's a lot more of that.
Yes, absolutely. Because the fact of the matter is, we wouldn't exist were it not for the sperm or eggs of this other person. So we're kind of held to this standard where we are told that we need to be really, really grateful, not only for the person who donated, but for the process of assisted reproduction and third-party reproduction and fourth-party, that we wouldn't exist without these technologies. And while that's true in many ways, I wouldn't exist otherwise, that does not preclude me from having very complicated feelings about how I came to exist. And someone can absolutely we have philosophical proofs. We have a professor at NYU who did a philosophical proof on this. You can be grateful to be alive and still have issue or complicated feelings regarding how you came to exist. Because the fact of the matter is that you're here now, so you can't really go back and not exist. And had my parents not gone this route, I just wouldn't exist, and I would not know any better. So it's very difficult. So we have a lot of parents who force feed the gratitude narrative to their children, or especially when they're talking to adult donor conceived people, that anytime we bring up an issue with either the fertility industry or the feelings of genealogical bewilderment, any difficulties that we go through, it's like, well, no, you shouldn't discuss that. You should just be grateful. And it's a very difficult conversation to have, because some people just don't want to understand how complicated it can be, and how important it is to fully flesh out all the feelings that you have regarding your conception.
The other thing that we came up with that I was thinking about, that a lot of people with misattributed parentage experience, that really isn't also applicable that much to people who are MPEs, is the idea of there's money tied to my origin story. And it really took me a while to understand how this affects people who are conceived through assisted reproduction. And I'm sure this also comes up in adoption as well.
It's huge. And this is where I personally find the most understanding between the adoption community and the community of donor conceived people or people conceived via assisted reproduction is the idea of commodification. It's very hard because we see even in larger NPE or MPE groups where it's a mixture of everyone who's finding out these secrets later in life, where if someone who is donor conceived shares their story, all the comments are, but your parents really wanted you, but you should be grateful. And similar with adoption, but weren't your adoptive parents great? You're probably very lucky that you were raised by your adoptive parents. Whereas if someone's describing their mother who had an affair and then lied about who their father was, nobody really goes into that to the same extent of, well, you should be glad that your mother had that affair because otherwise you wouldn't exist. And so that's very hard for people to understand, but it's also very hard for them to understand the idea of money being exchanged for your body, for your identity, and for your parentage. So, when I met my biological father, I asked him how much he was paid, and he told me that he was paid $35 for each sample that he gave. And my mother paid $100 per insemination. And so to me, because my ethnicity had changed so drastically. My dad who raised me is primarily, English colonial background. Adams is my maiden name. And my biological father is Jewish, and, my family all on that side, all more recent immigrants leaving Eastern Europe after the pogroms. Such a very, very different culture, very different ethnic background. And to me, that $35 was the price of having my ethnic background changed. That's what it equated to, was I lost 35 years of knowing my true ethnic background, my true identity, of giving the wrong health information for that small amount of money. For that small amount of money, my parentage was changed. People could just sign away their rights to parent me. And that the fact that it was such a small amount of money has been, was probably one of the biggest impacts of this whole experience, was the amount that I lost for that amount of money. And it's very hard, I think, to conceptualize of money being the trade-off for your identity until it actually happens to you. Like, I don't think I could have possibly understood the gravity of that until this occurred. And so I find it's difficult sometimes for people who were conceived in, via an affair or something, to grasp that. And that's something that I find adoptees have a much better understanding of, is the idea of this transaction that occurred, that you are the product that somebody purchased, and it's obviously very different when it's a baby versus a vial of sperm. It's different, but yet when that sperm becomes a person, that person's parentage was also traded for money, and it's just a very mind-boggling situation. So that is one of I did some artwork with that concept of the exchange of money. So it's a very difficult process to go through, as you all know.
I'm always surprised when I see when we talk about this, people will list how much they cost. Like I just can't even imagine having to add that complexity to everything at all. So another thing that I know everybody with a misattributed parentage experience has, it's some sense of this occurs. I think this is where we have the most commonalities, is an identity crisis or identity dysphoria, dysphoria meaning a state of unease or dissatisfaction. For me, I think I went through a severe identity crisis because I thought I was half Black. And so going through my life in that fashion and identifying with African American culture and everything else. And now I'm not. And, I recently had to go and, mark down my race on a form. And I don't consider myself a white woman. That's, I guess, what my DNA says I am now. But, it sent me for a tailspin, learning that I wasn't who I thought I was, that I was half Jewish, that my foundation of who I was based on a lie. And I think everybody in an MPE has some aspect of this.
Yeah, Cara, I have to kind of, with my age, I think about the culture of, I was born in the early 60s. In addition to the identity crisis you're talking about for yourself, I for whatever reason, I think about men a lot, about identity crisis and about how important their last name is to them. And when they find out that they are somebody else, I've had these conversations with some of the men in our groups, and it hits them like a ton of bricks. And it's a huge problem, and it's a huge problem, I'm sure, with the adoptees. You guys have probably dealt a lot with this also.
Yeah, that's why you see my last name is Rubenstein de Aaron. Rubenstein is my biological family name. So I adopted it as part of sort of rebuilding my sense of identity. I'm going to move on to the next one, which is really societal perceptions of your origin. I think all of us in different ways, how society perceives our origin story, if we're adopted, if we're the product of an affair or a one-night stand, or if we're donor conceived through assisted reproduction. We have this sort of different way that how society treats us. Are you a bastard? Some people who are very religious feel like they're a sin. The Jewish word for bastard is mamzar. There's a lot of stigma associated for us. So I think that really plays into the roller coaster ride of
yeah, you're right, Cara. That's a huge issue with our older population of MPEs that deal with that stigma, especially.
Cassandra, do you have anything you want to add about the stigma of your origin?
Yeah, it's lessening, and that's another thing that we're working on is as we were talking about the family tree projects and stuff, to hopefully get teachers and stuff to understand that there are different family arrangements now, and especially with Father's Day this weekend, I think so many of us know families where it's a 2-mom family or a single parent, whether or not there's any kind of donor or adoption situation involved, and that it's taking society a little bit longer to kind of catch up that there are these different family arrangements, and we have to be sensitive to everyone, especially to kids as they're growing up, because we don't want to transfer that shame onto you, that there's something wrong with you because of your family structure, because of how you were conceived. Because we're just, that's something we always like to say is, we're human too. We're just as human as anyone else. We want the same things that anyone else wants, and we're normal people just like anyone else. So we all want to have access to this information about ourselves.
Absolutely. So after this crazy roller coaster ride from our discovery, I think we go into what I call architect mode, where you have to try to rebuild your sense of self, who you are. I know it's a long process. I'm finally feeling comfortable with talking about my journey and the things that I've had to go through. One thing that I know is, and we've talked about a little bit of how we're shaping our sense of self through all of this, but I think sometimes some of us have to go back and sort of edit our past experiences. I know people like me who have big ethnicity changes really have to do this so you can understand some things about your growing up experience. we know there's an adoptee who did not know his ethnicity growing up. And when he finally did the DNA test to find his biological family, he was shocked to find out he was a total different ethnicity like myself than he thought. And there's another man who he thought he was white. And when he found out he was half Black, he now understood why he was treated like he was growing up. He didn't have the knowledge to understand why, when I step outside of my house, am I treated and differently than the rest of my siblings. And so I think going back and editing your old experiences to have a better understanding of why those things happen to you because of your MPE, your misattributed parentage experience, helps you to rebuild your sense of self. And then people also start creating new experiences. Like for me, I started going to temple so I could learn about my Jewish identity. And I think that that kind of is common across all MPEs. The other thing that I think, and we borrow from the adoption community some, where we have some commonality, is the ghost kingdom concept. You know, I think about sometimes what would it have been like to have a bar mitzvah, or, you know, to gone swimming with my dad, or, I mean, there's so many things I can think of. It's sometimes too easy to dwell in that area. And I think all of us with misattributed parentage experiences get there. The other thing I wanted us to touch on was who holds your origin story. And I know Cassandra has a lot to talk about this, but when you're an NPE and you're the product of an affair, an assault even, or a one-night stand, there's a lot of shame for your mother in that. And so often the mothers will say, you can't tell anybody about this. You have to hold that secret. For me, this is about me. And I didn't tell anybody for a reason. So you can't tell too. And this adds a different layer of shaping when you're trying to reshape your identity and understand what happened to you and move forward. Having to hold that secrecy can really affect you. I'm sure it does in assisted conception too.
Yes, it's true. And so many of us are told once we discover the secret not to tell anyone, especially if the secret was a heavily guarded one where no other family members or friends knew. And it varies. Sometimes it's the mother not wanting to tell because she was the one who kind of kept the secret. And sometimes it's the father, assuming it's a sperm donation situation. Sometimes it's the infertility grief, the parent who was infertile, who really wants the secret kept to protect their secret about their own infertility. And sometimes it's other family members, other siblings who may be donor conceived, who don't want other people to know that there was a donor involved. Or many of us are secrets within our new families as well, even when we are in a reunion of sorts with our biological parent who donated their gametes. Sometimes they don't disclose to family that they donated. So sometimes we're kept secrets from that new family, as I'm sure adoptees know too. When you're, if a family doesn't, one of your birth parents didn't tell anyone, that you become a secret in their family as well, or a secret in amongst your new siblings. So there are so many people who kind of also have their hands in this secret, and it's very difficult once the situation is blown apart. And that's the issue, I think, with DNA testing, is that it really blows the secret out. No one can keep the secret because you match with so many different people. So that's a big thing is trying not to hold on to these secrets anymore.
Yeah, Cassandra, I agree with you, because I think a lot about, what could have been, for me. And one thing I want to say to the adopted community that's here listening to us, it's your story. It's my story. This is personal, and we should be able to do whatever we want to with our story. And so as an encouragement for you guys, I want to just say to you, I'm so glad that we have you here listening to what we have to say, because we have learned so much from you guys. I mean, we're so happy that we have Leslie that has brought us to you. And the fact of the matter is, nobody should be holding the origins of our story any longer. Mm-hmm. We hold the keys now.
I know we're getting close to time, so we'll probably have about 5 more minutes here. We'll kind of speed through what's left. This is representing rejection or reunion with your genetic family. And I think this is, again, something that encompasses all of us, right? I think we have so much commonality here when we talk about reunion. We face the same issues with reaching out, the same fears, the same rejection, and we all have these stigmas that we carry with us from our unique conception that can affect our reunion or rejection with different people. I will, even though we're running out of time, I do want to tell this really quick story of this woman, because I think it's very shocking that people don't realize this happens. I learn I have a misattributed parentage experience. I'm the product of an affair. I tell my family that I grew up with. And so this is kind of even talking about our next slide, which is your familiar and friendships that you have prior, like not your new family, but the family you grew up with and your friends. And this lady, the dad who raised her showed up on her doorstep after about a year into her discovery with all of her childhood things in a black trash bag and said, "You're not mine. I'm done with you." And so it can just be so tragic where we get the rejection from. It doesn't just have to be genetic family. It can also be with our raising family when they find these things out. It can be just extremely difficult all places around. Of course, there's lovely stories of reunion too, and there is a lot of positive things. We get to prune our tree. Part of my family that I grew up with rejected me after they found out I wasn't genetically related to them. So it can occur from both places.
Yeah, and with me too, Cara, I had rejection from some half siblings and first cousins, but my second cousins were amazing. That's one thing that was really, I'm so thankful for them. But you can get the rejection from friends. I still don't understand that. I actually have a really good friend. I was mentioning this to Cara earlier, that is an adoptee, and she has chosen to not want to find her parents. And so when I found out about my story and I was trying to share with her, she actually shut me down. And that hurt really deep because we were very good friends. Later, she apologized to me, but it was something that made me realize, the sensitivity of all what we deal with here.
So I just want to, this is an overview of everything, how we're the same, the things that we all deal with. I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about right to know. We have 2 main principles. It's a fundamental human right to know your genetic identity, full stop. There's no questions after that. We all have a right to know. And we also think that everybody with an MPE needs a seat at the table when decisions are being made that affect us, because our voices really matter in these cases. We haven't had a seat at the table in the past, and we need one going forward. So how do we help MPEs process through these 3 phases? At Right to Know, we have 3 pillars: mental health, education, and legislation. And we think it's important that people have access to the resources they need to go through those phases and as best possible that they can. So most of what we do for free. Alesia, you want to talk about mental health real quick?
Yeah. When Cara and I started this journey together, we were so intent on making sure that we help people, especially with the mental health aspect. We created a way to be able to help people. It's like a buddy network, really. We have this number 323-TALK-MPE that people can call in or email, and we'll be able to work with them in finding, we put here, I say buddy network, but MPE mentors. And we have quite a number of, over a dozen, if not more than 20 volunteers that we have trained. I think it was 15 in the first class we did. And I'm sorry if the sun is coming through on the back of my window here. But it's something that we found very, very important, that we make sure we connect people with that. First, when we get a mentor for them, they're maybe calling us wanting to have a therapist. So as we're looking in their state to find the right therapist that will help meet their needs, we buddy them up with another MPE for maybe a couple weeks to a month. We also do this program through Zoom called Community and Connection, and we have a licensed therapist once a month, the first Sunday, Pacific time at 12 noon, that we actually have our own group therapy, and we've been doing this for about 6 or 7 months now. We're putting together, well, actually, we're in the process of like dealing with a lot of social, I can't think of the word, where the directory, what I'm talking about, where our therapists are. We have this list, a whole web page for a directory of therapists that help us. A lot of them are the ones that come in and they facilitate the community and connection we do. You can find it at mpecounseling.org or npecounseling.org, either one of those. What I was trying to say about the webpage, if you have any trouble getting into it, we've having on the back end people helping to work on the back end of our web pages. So some of them have been having trouble getting into the site. But the best thing about helping folks to find a therapist is that we're hearing that they're having trouble with the person that they have found not understanding what they're going through. So when we find somebody that we match up with the MPE, it's been exciting because they're coming back with us and giving us feedback and saying that they feel so much better that somebody understands what they're going through. They're feeling supported in a better way, and the person that's the therapist is more open and understanding of what's going on, because we've been working hard to educate, and that's one thing. I think, Cara, if you want to speak a little bit about that too.
Well, real quickly, the directory basically is a list of therapists we know has experience working with misattributed parentage, and we're trying to fill in at least 2 in every state, and then we'll keep filling it from there. So if you guys have a good therapist you think we should add to the list, let us know, because we'd love to keep filling it. We do an educational webinar on different topics that are related to misattributed parentage each month, like healing through focused activities was one, how to interact with narcissistic family was another one, societal perceptions of ancestral DNA and ethnicity. We're also in the process of doing this survey. If you guys feel like taking it, that'd be great. My goal is to have 500 people do this survey. We're working with Westchester University.
Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania. Dr. Foman and Dr. Lawton are helping us with this. They do the DNA discussion project. There's been smaller surveys done with a goal of 500. Believe it or not, this will be one of the biggest surveys done on misattributed parentage experiences. So we're excited for that. And then we're going to be launching a new, this is where we've been working with Leslie.
Hey, can I stop you a second, Cara? I want to make sure that you put up that survey into the chat.
Okay.
So that folks can maybe take, if you guys are late discovery adoptees, and if you would be interested in taking the survey, we would so appreciate that. We have, for me, I feel like doing this kind of clinical study is very important. It takes probably about 12 minutes to take it. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say about that, to see if anybody would be able to take it with us.
So in the fall, we're excited to be launching a MP education website, and there'll be actually mental health classes for mental health professionals to take to get continuing education credits. We have a core class that has a section on identity, grief and loss, ethical and psychological implications, and then navigating reunion that Leslie's volunteered to teach. And then there'll be a lot of other CEU classes available. And then we have general information classes for anybody to take, like how to change your name if you want to, or understanding your DNA test, like when you first get it and you're like, what the heck does this mean? Or learning about your new culture that you discovered. And there'll be a lot of other classes there. And then the last thing that we are doing is building connection with legislators. We're starting with broad-based fertility fraud laws. We're working in Iowa, Michigan, New York, Oregon, and Washington right now. We have proposed legislation. We believe in broad-based fraud. So anytime anybody commits fraud in the fertility industry, we think that there should be a criminal penalty for that and a civil cause of action. Believe it or not, there's not right now. The fertility industry is very unregulated.
Wild West.
Yeah, it's the Wild West.
Wild West.
So we're trying to get those laws passed. A lot of people are hearing about doctor fertility fraud, where a doctor used his own sperm. The mother thinks they're having an anonymous donor, they ask for a specific donor, but there's also other types of fraud where the donors are switched, or the donor lies about their health, or the clinic lies to the donor. And there's so many areas where this occurs. So We're hoping to get these laws passed in every state. And then we want to make sure, just like in the adoption world, you all deserve access to your original birth certificates. We want to make sure that that's happening in every state, and same with the identity information for people who are conceived by assisted reproduction. And then finally, we have in the works of creating a legal clinic to help people who have a misattributed parentage who do need any legal help. And I just want to plug in the end here, we work with DNA Angels. They're a free search group. They're amazing. And we work with Severance Magazine. I don't know if you guys have been there, but she has the most amazing resource list I've seen of anybody anywhere. So that's it.
Wow. That's a lot of information and it was great. And I know there's so many of you out there that have questions, and I want to make sure that we give you a chance to answer those questions. But I know there was a Zoom attendee earlier that one of the first questions he asked was about DNA testing. What specific tests did you use to find out? And did you use multiple DNA testing? So I'll kick it off with that.
So I splattered my DNA everywhere. I will say one thing I should mention, right to know comes from my biological father. Every time I saw him, he would tell me, baby, you have a right to know who your family is, where you come from. And he said that to me every day. And that's where the name comes from. He was a total jerk when I was growing up, but he really stepped up to the plate the last few years of his life and was very supportive of me. So I've taken a test everywhere. I started with Ancestry, but when I got the results, I was sure Ancestry messed up. Even though I had some family from my mom's side, maybe they just switched half the DNA somehow. So I did a 23andMe test, and then I've done a family tree DNA test. I'm on GEDmatch. Everywhere I could find, because I did not find my family at first. Being Jewish, you realize you have 10,000 cousins, but none of them are very close.
Yeah, I went with Ancestry back in 2014 because that was, where I think the most people were taking it. That's where I found out about my MPE status. But 3 years later, I did take the 23andMe, and it was through the 23andMe and more people taking the test, obviously, that I finally got my big break in my case.
Yeah, for anyone interested in DNA testing, the two main ones are Ancestry and 23andMe. Those are the only two that you need to buy an actual spit test for. If you do those two, Ancestry and 23andMe, you can then upload your results from those two to all the other sites where you might find genetic relatives. So yes, and yes, we are all, anybody with Jewish DNA is distantly related. So we've got many new cousins, including Cara and Alesia are my cousins now. So.
Family tree DNA is, if you have European family, it's definitely used more by people in Europe. So that's, and like Cassandra said, you can just upload your stuff.
Great, thank you. Okay, we want to open this up to questions, so please feel free to either take yourself off mute, raise your virtual hand. You can put something in the chat bar. Who's got a question? We always start off quiet.
I do want to say that, Marcie, I really enjoyed looking through some of the chat, what folks were saying in your group here. I mean, it was just, thank you so much for your support. I mean, I sensed what you guys were saying, how much what we were saying really resonated with you guys.
Oh, you're welcome. And we will be sending you a copy of the chat comments, so you'll have that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you a lot.
Now, there was a lot of great comments in here.
Yeah, I haven't read them, but I'm looking right now. $150 your parents paid for you? Oh my gosh. It's hard, I think, for NPEs to really relate to the commodification concept. But it's just heartbreaking to me. I remember on one thing with assisted conception, there was a whole bunch of people on there and they were just listing how much was paid for them. It resonates with the concept of slavery for me, having grown up thinking I was half Black. And it's disturbing.
I'm curious about those of you what do you think about the mental health side of things, that what we're creating with our program for therapists and so forth?
I think that's wonderful. I mean, I know Leslie and I and several others, we've been talking about getting the adoption competent therapist directory somehow in each state. Leslie, you can speak to that too if you want to take yourself off mute. I mean, I just think some of these programs that you're putting together, it's wonderful. I mean, these resources.
Well, we want to help you guys too as much as possible.
Well, this is Leslie, and yes, I'm so thrilled with these two communities coming together, and I think we're going to do so much more together, refine what we need, our treatment, get people up to par, talking to us legally. It's just, I love all these different angles, and I think together we're just really going to be powerful. So I'm thrilled.
Thanks, Leslie. I know we do have, Peter, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we do have Australia in attendance tonight. So Peter, can you speak to anything since you're obviously in a different country? I mean, do you have anything similar?
Absolutely. Everything's similar. We've been advocating here. I mentioned in the comments about recent government inquiry in Victoria. And I raised many of those issues, especially about the mental health. We've got a push now on to get support for some research into mental health of adoptees in Australia. Similarly, although our record's been open for some time, they aren't tied or linked to longitudinal studies of adoptees and medical records and that, which we know they can link them. There might be some effort on their part, but the data's there. And so it's very much, I see this very much as an international issue or that needs to be addressed locally and internationally. Sorry for the background noise. I've got grandkids here who and laughter can turn into a fight at any second. Yeah, so look, everything you're saying resonated with us, and yeah, I think I agree with was it Leslie who said that the two sides coming together, or the three sides coming together, I think is important. We have power in numbers, and we're talking about with traumatized people who are reluctant to come forward to advocate. We're just the tip of the iceberg of all those other people that we're representing. Yeah, I don't know what more to add here. I followed your link to the survey, so it's in my browser bar. But yeah, I'm looking forward to be able to work closely with donor conceived and NPEs. I'm on DNA NPE Facebook website. I guess some of you probably are as well. So I was well aware.
We actually have a couple of Facebook pages too. This NPE Life and NPE Cultural Connections.
All right.
Yeah.
Yep.
We have to look. We definitely look to Australia. There's a large number of donor conceived people in Australia who've made so much progress there. Australia is probably the most progressive country in the world on donor conception, especially the state of Victoria. All donors are open at 18. There's notation on birth certificates that someone is donor conceived, so they, cannot be lied to the same degree that they can be. But, as you were saying too, Peter, like this, it becomes a global issue because, a number of clinics worldwide use sperm from America in order to kind of get around some of the regulations in their own countries. And even in Australia as well, donors can't be paid. So it does become more of an altruistic thing. They've banned the payment of donors. So there's so much about regulation in this country and regulation in other countries that ends up affecting the whole world.
Yeah, I think people should understand that when you give sperm an egg or a donor, an egg or sperm, you have a duty of care to that person. It's not a donate and walk away. They deserve the right to know about their family history, and their medical history. And you can't sever that. That goes for someone who's giving up a child for adoption. There's no walking away from those ties. And it just makes us much better adults having access to that information.
Well,
Otherwise, we're going through these phases that we just talked about. And not that we wouldn't go through them, I just think that they would be less impactful as they are.
Right.
And
We all
here-
know people who may not want to find their genetic parents, especially if they're given updated medical information, may not want an actual relationship. But the point is that everybody has the right to know who their parents are, what their medical information is, and have the opportunity to have an open relationship if they so choose, because to make either adoption or third-party reproduction anonymous takes all the choice away from the parties who are most affected.
well, this is Leslie, and this is like enforcing ethics. As we get more powerful, we're the group that it all affected, but we have to get them to treat us humanely.
That's why united, our voices are much stronger. I fully believe that. We have so much commonality that we need to embrace that. Something that's near and dear to me, and this is my 10-year goal, because I know how onerous it is to change legislation. I want birth certificates that have genetic mother, genetic father, parent 1, parent 2, even parent 3. I met a woman last weekend who had 3 parents on her birth certificate. Great. And a room for surrogate. And that information, everybody should have access to. And that way we can't lose that information.
I just want to say something in the meantime while we have this 10-year goal. I am so happy that we have each other, that we're a very rich community, and together we can I think we'll be able to accomplish what we'd like to see happen through Right to Know's legislative branch. And I mean, I'm thankful for what we have with the MPE community, because I don't know if I could I don't know where I would be. I mean, it's been mentally very difficult for me. I've come a long way, and I'm so grateful. Even the work that I'm doing, and I know we've got dozens of volunteers that I know when I hear this from other people, they say the same thing I think about, is that by getting out and volunteering, doing what we're doing together, Marcie, what you do, it just helps you in your healing process when you're helping others. I want to say there was one person, Amy Epperson, I think you had your hand up. Did you have something to add?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much. I just wanted to speak to the mental health piece. I'm a licensed clinical social worker with a background in trauma. So, and that's been very helpful to sort of have that background and have apply it to this experience. And as was said, that we're just at the beginning of this, right? Like we often, I do some groups in the web and the Facebook group with a couple other people. And, we always notice the newer you are in your discovery, the harder time you're having. And when people actually do get some good support and understanding and frameworks for talking about their experience, I've seen people like improve really quickly, honestly. So and it sounds like other people have too. It's been exciting to kind of see the themes you guys talked about, with same sort of things we're coming to in our own sort of, I think all of us have done what of course we'd all do, is just find a couple people to talk to, and like you're kind of working it out and figuring it all out. And somebody had the fog slide, Cara, that was beautiful. And I think we're all coming more and more out of that, and we're gonna be at the front of it. And it's great to see that we're already having all these structures to help other people, because we need to do that. Like, that's the win-win. People coming into this need the support, and we get so much from giving support to each other. So that, yeah, in my day job, I do like trauma training series. So I did link it in there. Bradley Hall and Dr. Paulette Bethel did just an introductory training on the topic and what it is. And so we're hoping, I don't know, everyone has said that their therapist does not understand. And so I'm really glad to see that you want to offer classes, and I know you already have some great resources, and just want to appreciate that, and hope to be part of building more resources for people.
So our mental health initiative is shaped by 4 people on our mental health board. Leslie's on that. And then we have Jody Rob Klugman, who is an MPE like us, Cody Bowman, who's also an MPE, and then we have Lynn Spencer, who was conceived through assisted reproduction. All of them are licensed therapists. And so, and the reason we have that broad group is because we want to make sure every voice is there from our communities, shaping our mental health initiatives and programs. And really the need for mental health training was what we all saw first, right? That's what we saw first. So that's where we started there. But, sky's the limit, right?
Yeah, and we know about awareness. This is Awareness Month. I'm not sure if adoptees have heard about that. This month is for the awareness. For us as MPEs in our group with Right to Know, we're not just talking about 1 month. We are working 365. We're going to be doing this, all year round, bringing awareness. And I just want to say, if any of you guys are interested in volunteering, look us up online. We love to have volunteers and that work with us, mentors, any one of you guys interested either on the legal side of things, that maybe you guys are an attorney. We're always welcome to talk with anybody that's looking for a place to hang their hat at.
Susan, can I ask what you're asking in the chat?
Suzanne?
Suzanne, yeah, sorry.
Yes. Hi.
Hi. Sorry to call you out. I just want to answer your question, but I'm not sure what you're asking.
So you're calling the whole process. Sorry. What is it that you're calling the whole process? I'm talking
conception or
conception. It's like the umbrella of the whole process.
Yeah.
But what would you call, like now people call the person a donor, which is basically a lie. So what would you then call the donor?
Gotta have, what do you have, Cassandra?
Yeah, I mean, we encourage parents who are using donors now to use biological parent or genetic parent, because from people who've known their whole lives, the feedback, what we've learned is that people who were told it's just a donor their whole lives, didn't really quite understand what that meant, or that the donor was one of their genetic parents, until there was this like breakthrough when you're an adult. And then they ended up also feeling lied to, because the extent of who this person was not really disclosed to them. So we encourage parents, and that's something we're trying to broach with the fertility industry as well, because a lot of therapists and psychologists that work for the fertility clinics are very intent on making sure that parents use the donor terminology, and it ends up really dehumanizing and minimizing what that person is. And so we're trying to get parents now to be a little more honest. There are some great books. My daughter is 5 years old, and I found out when she was 1.5 years. So I went through the process of trying to explain it to her, trying to explain my conception to her. And so I got a lot of insight into what parents who are using donors end up having to explain. So it's very easy to explain to a 2-year-old child that there's an egg and a sperm, and they come together and they make a baby. And then you run around the room all happy because yay, baby. So that's kind of how we're encouraging parents to talk about it now is, there's a lot of information in the egg and there's a lot of information in the sperm, and they come together and that's what makes you. And so these are the components of who you are, just to try to plant the seeds early on of what this person is to the child, and also to be honest about what the person is as far as how the genetics that they pass on, but also not to. And I think adoptees understand that a lot of times perhaps adoptive parents may not be fully truthful about what their child's birth parents are like, or they don't know, and so they fill in the blanks. And that happens with a donor as well, is that sometimes parents plant the seed of, oh, it's just this very, very nice man, this very, very nice woman. And then they are years later rejected. And it's as we were talking about that ghost kingdom, of building up this person. So we're trying to encourage parents to use accurate terminology as far as like biological or genetic parent, but also to be as honest as possible and as factual as possible with information about that genetic parent, about what kind of traits they pass down or what kind of interests they have, rather than judgment calls that about what kind of person this is that you may not know. So that's kind of just kind of a taste of what we're trying to do as far as how parents talk about donors now, and how we're trying to get away from that word, even though it's kind of part of our lexicon now.
I like that, Cassandra. Genetic. I mean, I think it is genetic father, genetic mother. I mean, you have to have a sperm and you have to have an egg to make a human. But I know there's got to be pushback about using the term parent or mother or father, because the raising parent probably feels threatened by the second word, not the sperm and the egg words. It's
right.
The other word.
Exactly. And it's very hard. And there's a meme, I think, that's been shared a lot in the adoptee community, that like all my parents are my real parents, stop asking which are the real ones and which are the not real ones, and a good number of us who are adults who've met our genetic parents, truthfully, we feel that they have a place in our life, whether we want to call them a parent to the same degree as another. They're different kinds of parents. They do different things. And that's how I explained it to my daughter, saying that, her daddy, is her genetic father and also is raising her. And for me, I have two different kinds of daddies, one who helped make me and one who raised me. And it's surprising how much kids can understand when you plant those seeds early, and it never has to be a lie, and it's just building on knowledge, and they're all things that kind of help people, and also building relationships early too. We're really trying to kind of push assisted reproduction in the direction of open adoptions, at least to start, because I know open adoptions are far, 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 far from perfect. But if we can at least move third-party reproduction to that level, we'd be making progress for the next generation, where parents are at least even open to the idea of allowing their children to be in touch with genetic family, because it's so important.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all of this wonderful information. Now we've got some more questions here, and we're out of time. And I'm sorry for that. We could probably sneak in this one question about, now I've lost it. I had it pulled up, about birth certificates. And where did it go?
I'm trying to change my birth certificate.
Yeah, it says, I lost it again.
Well, I was going to say, I'm trying to change my birth certificate. You can change your name very easily. So what really got me started with Right to Know is I was reading Washington state law about changing your birth certificate for paternity, not your name. Your name is really easy to change. The paternity is much harder. And in Washington state law, which has we've enacted the most recent Parentage Act. So like only 4 states have done this, right? It's supposed to be the modern version, but it clearly states right in there that if you're donor conceived, you have no rights at all. You're a second-class citizen to your paternity. And that's really what started me. I was just shocked at reading that codified in this day and age. To change your birth certificate, you have to go to court. It is, because think about why the problem is with birth certificates. We have a social reason we have birth certificates, and we have a legal reason we have birth certificates, right? The legal reason we have them is, like I said, who pays for little Timmy's baseball when it gets hit into somebody's window? That's why we have birth certificates from the legal perspective. But from the societal perspective, we want to know who great grandpa was. So we go back and we look at our birth certificates. And those two ideas about birth certificates don't mesh. And it in the law, after age 18 or 22, nobody cares about the birth certificate anymore. And in many states, there's a statute of limitations where you can't change it after age 18 because who cares who's legally responsible for you? You're an adult. So it's actually really hard. Sorry, Marcie, did you find it? Uh-oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute. You're on mute. She doesn't know. I don't know if she knows.
Marcie, you're on mute.
Okay. If they wanted the question asked if MPEs can petition a court for an amended birth certificate. That's the one.
Yeah, so I think I kind of answered that. You can, but it's very hard. And over-the-counter DNA is not admissible in court. Only family tree, those of you who want some like nitty-gritty information, the over-the-counter information can be used to open the door in court to request court-sanctioned DNA testing. However, family tree DNA does have the option for chain of custody. And so it is the only over-the-counter DNA testing kit that courts will use if you've used the chain of custody option. It costs an extra couple $100s. And the other thing that I learned in doing all of my legal studies is that the court DNA uses, and I might get this wrong, but I think they use STR DNA tests. And so they only match like 13 markers. So it's really only good for parent-child proof. So like in my case, my birth father's dead. I can't get his DNA. My 1/2 brother is dead. So the closest relative for me is a half niece or nephew. So if I was to use the STR DNA that the court uses, it wouldn't really show the relationship. Whereas the over-the-counter DNA tests use SNP markers and they look at 500,000 to 700,000 markers. So you can see the difference in how those tests look at things, which is why if I ever needed DNA to go to court, I would have to use family tree DNA because they would have a broad enough test to show that familiar relationship, whereas the normal court DNA doesn't. Peter, you have a question? Oh.
Unmute yourself.
I couldn't find the cursor. Yeah, we have had a number of people here, as you know, had their adoptions discharged, in other words, annulled. And in a couple of cases, one in Victoria and one in the Supreme Court in New South Wales, they have accepted ancestry DNA and the methodology to determine deceased parentage. Which I think it was huge.
Yeah.
A couple of things you raised there about the legal use of birth certificate. Now we get this argument here as well. And my argument is, well, hang on a minute. When someone gets married, do they change the woman's birth certificate? Yes. No. So you're using a chain, a paper trail for legal. So what's the difference? What in adoptee case, why didn't they use the adoption certificate the same as they use a marriage certificate? It can hold the same weight. Yeah, they're just excuses they're throwing up at us. It can be done, but we need the will for it to be done. Yeah, I know I've been talking in my own case, trying to get my father on my birth certificate. 99% on, through our forced adoption era, there was no father on the birth certificate because he would have been just another person to hold up the adoption or stop the adoption. So I've been knocked back twice on that. I've been talking to, yesterday, I got a phone call from the most senior person in birth, deaths and marriage, or second most senior person in birth, deaths and marriage in Australia. And it sounds very positive that I might get that through. There doesn't seem to be a reason why they can't, although they threw up a lot of, obstacles, but it looks like, so fingers crossed, I might get it. And that's important for me on a number of reasons. One of them is that, obviously from my middle name there, my father was Italian. And although I could probably get Italian dual citizenship without it, it would just help that much extra to have it on the birth certificate.
We hear that a lot. I know you guys all want to go, and I appreciate saying, but I left my email, Peter. I'd love to hear how that goes legally for you.
Yeah, sure.
But we've seen that in other cases with citizenship rights in Europe too. So who's on your birth certificate does have some ramifications past 18.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Peter.
I'm looking for your email address because I really
I'll
want
put
to.
it in again.
Yep. All right. I'll snip it.
Good conversation tonight. Great questions,
Yeah.
and we really
Thanks,
appreciate
Cara.
the three of you this evening and meeting NAAP and all of our attendees, and we look forward to working with you in the future. So obviously you haven't seen the last of us, so we're really excited about having you on tonight. We're honored to have you tonight, and we hope to see you in the future. So we're going to have a couple of closing comments here. Beth, if you have a slide ready for me, we would like to go ahead and talk about our next week's guest. As soon as she shares our screen.
I'm sorry, I had it here and now I'm not finding it. Let me see. I can't find Marcie's.
You can't find Marcie's. Okay. Marcie Purcell is here tonight from AKA. Marcie, take yourself off speaker.
Hi, guys.
There she is. She'll be joining us for our Friday night happy hour next week at 7 o'clock. She's with AKA. You want to just say a few words since we have right to know here?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm excited. I'm really excited to hear about Right to Know. Cassandra and I have already been introduced, but it is really great to hear her speak and hear her story in full or fuller. And AK is really excited to share out this information about Right to Know with our membership.
Great. We look forward to seeing you and chatting about AKA next week.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited about talking more about what we're doing. And there is some crossover between Right to Know. So it'll be some more of the same, and then a lot of information about foster care and birth certificates and all that stuff that we all have in common.
Great. Thank you, Marcie. Okay, and then we just did want to mention too, to mark your calendars, don't forget that we have our Adoptee Paths to Recovery support group with David Bowl. He's the director and addiction and recovery consultant for NAAP. So that's scheduled for Tuesday, June 29th, 5:30 EST. So mark your calendars, and then we'll have Dr.
I
Joyce.
they were going to make me say something. I probably would have got off.
We'll have Dr. Joyce back on Tuesday, July 13th for putting yourself together after reunion. You definitely want to make sure that you mark your calendars for this. We usually sell out. The tickets go pretty quickly for her. So make sure that you join us at that time as well. Again, on behalf of NAAP, we really appreciate having everyone on this evening. Thank you so much, Right to Know. And we'll see everybody online.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Happy Father's Day, you guys out there.
Oh, Father's. Drive safe, Cassandra.
Good
Bye,
night.
everybody.
Great
Bye.
job.
Good to see you, Alyssa. Glad you were here.
Thank you all so much.
Great job.
Thanks, everybody. Thank
Your
you. Bye.
presentation is really excellent. That was
Oh,
really
thanks, Marcie. Oh, Cara's so good with the tech stuff. I'm so grateful to have her.
Yes.
We work pretty good together.